All right, so welcome. This is a zero to continuous delivery with Jenkins Pipeline and Blue Ocean. If you're not expecting that, you're in the wrong room, just saying. So, hello everyone. My name is Newman. I am a CI/CD practitioner. I'm a Jenkins contributor. Mostly I'm a Word engineer these days. My Twitter, my Gmail, if you guys want to contact me, it's great. So what I'm going to do today is show you how you can create from scratch, have a project that has no continuous integration, no continuous delivery, and how you can build a continuous integration pipeline in Blue Ocean on Jenkins, starting from scratch to having your basic continuous delivery pipeline. So I'm assuming that everyone already knows what continuous delivery is, but I'm just going to kind of cover the basic point here, which is the core tenet of continuous delivery is to allow us to deliver software in short cycles and give us a straightforward, repeatable deployment process that lets us have a degree of certainty about the artifacts that we're delivering. So who here knows Jenkins? Good, that's where I like to start this one. Who here knows Jenkins Pipeline? Familiar with it, okay. Lot fewer people, that's all right. So Jenkins Pipeline was Jenkins' long-time CI/CD tool. Jenkins Pipeline was created to support the evolution of continuous integration to continuous delivery for the entire industry. Jenkins Pipeline is a tool for defining your continuous delivery process as code and checking it in along with your project. The pipeline allows you to capture the entire continuous delivery process. You store it in a Jenkins file. We have been working on the documentation quite a bit. You can find it on Jenkins.io, WAC, doc, book, pipeline. And the thing about pipeline is it allows your entire team to collaborate on the continuous delivery process. 4 years ago or so, when I was doing a lot of freestyle jobs in pipeline, I was the Jenkins guy on the team, and people were like, well, we need to ask the Jenkins guy to go do that. And one of the key points of having your pipeline, your continuous delivery pipeline as code, is that it lets everyone work on it as code, just like anything else. So your developers can go in, make changes, and version your pipeline along with your changes to your build or your product. One key point about Jenkins Pipeline is that it is not, unlike Job DSL or Jenkins Job Builder, it's not a job creation tool that generates a job in Jenkins that then goes and runs separately. It is in fact a runtime inside Jenkins. It's a new fundamental type of job in Jenkins. New is somewhat a loose term. It's been around for a couple of years now. So the next point here is Blue Ocean. Who has played with Blue Ocean yet in Jenkins? Oh, wow. Okay, good. Definitely, this is going to be fun for you because you're going to see. You saw yesterday during the keynotes Jenkins how it's looked for the last 5 years, and today you're going to see Jenkins looking like something from today as opposed to 5 years ago. Blue Ocean is a new user experience for Jenkins. It's built on Jenkins Pipeline as a foundation. It's designed to help developers work with Pipeline. It makes the continuous delivery process accessible to everyone, not just the developers that are familiar with how to code and how to write Pipeline, but also other members of your team that are more interested in, say, using a UI to access their pipelines. Blue Ocean is really best explained by showing it, so let me just show you a few images. This is the screen I like to see when I run my pipelines in Blue Ocean. This is Blue Ocean here. As you can see, it's a much cleaner interface. It's designed to show you the pipeline that you've run. And this is, as I said, this is what I'd like to see. It's a successful run of my pipeline. To explain what you can see here, what you have is a build stage, followed by a set of parallel stages that browser test stages that run Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer, so on and so forth, Safari, all of those in parallel on either the same machine or on different machines. That's controllable from within the pipeline. Next, you have a static analysis phase, and then a deploy stage, where we would deploy the artifacts that we've built to staging or to production environments. So each stage shown here has a series of steps that you can see at the bottom, so what you can see here is that you see an overall view of your stages and the overall flow of your pipeline, and then by clicking on one of those stages, you can see the steps that were performed in that stage. I'll get to more detail on this later. This is my second favorite thing to see in Jenkins, which, although it's bad for the product in terms of, oh darn, something failed, it's really great for me as a developer, because what I get to see here is, where did things go wrong? They went wrong in that one Firefox stage. And one of the cool things about Blue Ocean is that it's designed around helping developers get to the information that they need. So in this case, Jenkins has found that the error occurred in that one Firefox stage. It's taken me directly to and that error occurred in the third step of that stage. And it's taken me directly to the log output for that particular step, rather than having to scroll through a bunch of console logs and try and figure out where the error occurred. It takes me right there. So Blue Ocean also has a pipeline editor built into it that can be used to edit declarative pipelines. And you can save from this, and then it generates the pipeline as code Jenkins file. And you can go and edit that file manually, and then come back and look at this look in the UI, or go back and forth as you choose. So it's full round tripping even after manual editing. Either way, this lowers the barrier for people to be able to work with the Jenkins pipeline without necessarily sacrificing the advantages of having your pipeline as code. I'll show you a bit more of the editor in a bit, but I'll also point out that I'm going to probably step out of the editor a little bit, because I'm more comfortable sometimes working with the code and just showing the code specifically. So we'll sort of go back and forth depending on what's most convenient. So everything in this presentation can be tested and experimented on using the official Blue Ocean container, Docker container, which is based off the Jenkins LTS release, and it's updated with each new release of the LTS or Blue Ocean. Blue Ocean is just, by the way, Blue Ocean, when you install it, is just a plugin. It sits on top of Jenkins. It does not, if you're used to using Jenkins, you still want to use the classic UI, totally fine. It just gives you a new experience on top of that you can add onto it, that users can get to. So let's start with an application with no continuous delivery pipeline. Start from zero. So you have an application today for which you'd like to create a pipeline. For this example, I picked a little sample app called JHipster. It's an open source application generator for creating little Spring Boot Angular projects. What I like about this project is that it looks similar to a modern web application. It uses several different tools and technologies, and it doesn't just have just one particular moving part. It's actually several pieces. So you have the backend API, which is built using Java and Maven. You have the front end, which has a Node.js system that uses Gulp, and it has some performance tests implemented with Gatling, and it can even be packaged up and deployed as a Docker container. So one place I like to start is sort of thinking about my pipeline and planning out what I'm going to do. So before I dive into the code, I'm going to sort of just cover what sort of stages I'm going to be looking for. So because I'm using different technologies, there's going to be several different stages that may be broken out a little bit differently than they might always, just because I'm going to be using some Docker containers to run, say, Node or Maven in different ways. The build, so you have a build stage, fairly straightforward. We'll compile the Java application so that we have something to work with. And then I'll run some tests. This can be thought of in a few different ways. We need to run unit tests on the Java the Java backend. We probably want to run the performance test, the Gatling tests, and we also want to run some front-end tests that use Node.js. After that, I might want to do some static analysis, and then finally do some deployment. So now that I've sketched out a pipeline, at least conceptually, I'm going to move over to Blue Ocean and look at the pipeline editor and quickly translate that sort of sketch into an actual pipeline that runs. I'm going to create this. There it is. So here's my JHipster sample app on GitHub. And here's Blue Ocean. This is where you start when you load up Blue Ocean. Actually, let me show you. Let me start from the very. If I load up my Jenkins instance, I still have. Here's my Jenkins, and then I go here and I open Blue Ocean, and I haven't created any pipelines at all in this particular instance. So Blue Ocean offers to create a new pipeline for me. And one of the cool things about Blue Ocean is you start off. It actually is very helpful. It has a nice workflow for helping you find what project you're going to be adding your continuous delivery pipeline to. So mine is in this organization, and there's my JHipster sample app, and I'm going to create a pipeline. And it notices that I don't have a Jenkins file in there yet, and immediately takes me to the Blue Ocean editor. So from here, I can add stages. Let's see, I'll call that first one build. Let's see, do I have? Yeah, let's do agent any. And for this build, yeah. Blue Ocean editor, of course, knows that it has some checks to make sure that I'm not creating meaningless pipeline. So I'm going to create this pipeline here, and I'm just going to run env for this first one, so I can show that this is your basic create Jenkins file. There we go. I'm going to commit this to master. Now, usually in a workflow, I would be doing this on pull requests. Blue Ocean has a UI for that actually will run tests against pull requests as well. But for the sake of convenience, I'm going to just be committing directly to master as I go along. Since I only have 27 minutes left. So Blue Ocean will, of course, start up and has to clone down the repository, which over this network may be a little slow. There we go. Yep, there we go. And of course, as it finishes that, it goes on to the next step, shows me the console log for that as well. And oh, yes, I had to clone it again. Okay, that's fine. Anyways, while it's running, as I said, the network is a little slower. So let's start with our build. Next, we're going to have our backend test stage. Call it the backend stage, and I'm going to add parallel stages in here. So the default name, there we go. Unit test for the backend, and what did I say? Performance, yeah. So as you can see, it's very easy to create parallel stages here that I can run multiple items on. Blue Ocean telling me that I need to fill those in. I'll do that in just a second. Front end. And let's see, static analysis. And finally, deploy. All right, and of course, it's going to tell me that I need to fill those in. So I'm just going to put env steps in here, as they're easy to change later on. This is probably the slowest part of this process, just getting the first outline set up. All right. All right, there we go. And save. So what's happening as I do that save is that Jenkins, the Blue Ocean editor, is taking what I've outlined and turning that into a Jenkins pipeline, into code, and pushing that up to GitHub, and then it goes and runs the pipeline when that's done. So here's my pipeline having run. I can go to any of these stages. Of course, they're all envs in this case, but and I can see the output from that. All right, so that's my outline. Let's go back over to this. There we go. All right. So let's talk about the build stage. You'll hear me say this a few times during this presentation. Don't reinvent whatever it is that you're doing. Don't reinvent your deploy system. Don't reinvent your build system. Pipeline, Jenkins Pipeline and pipelines in general should be glue. They should be something that you already have this sort of functionality, and then the pipeline allows you to connect those things together in easily and quickly. So obviously, the goal of our build is to perform a reproducible build. We're going to create an artifact which can be used later to run tests or to deploy to an environment. And in this case, we're going to use Maven. This would be the simplest build stage, simplest pipeline actually that we could do on this particular project. I'm going to do a little bit more complex than that. This pipeline is making a lot of assumptions, and that's what I don't want to do. This is simple, but it makes too many assumptions for me. First, it assumes that we're running in a Linux-ish environment. It assumes that that MVN is installed on that machine. And these assumptions aren't bad, but keep in mind this application needs to have Java, Maven, Node, Gulp, Gatling, so on, so forth. And that can get really messy to have to maintain all of those. So to handle the various system requirements at the different stages of this pipeline, I'm going to use the built-in Docker support in Jenkins Pipeline to create Docker containers for me to run my stages in. So instead of creating one big image with all of the system requirements in one container, I'm going to be using specific containers for each one of these things. So the build stage in this case, so what we have here is the agent directive with the Docker directive inside it, asking for an image of a Maven 3 Alpine, a container based on the Maven 3 Alpine image. And I'm going to use arguments here to map the M2 directory for Maven, where it caches all the downloaded dependencies. I'm going to map that from the container into my host system so that I have those cached and don't have to reload them every time I start up. There are, of course, many more advanced options you can do on Docker, but this is what the basic form should look like. And so what I'm going to do is after that agent directive, I'll have a series of steps in my build stage. The steps will be a shell command to run the Maven build, but skip the tests. which I'm going to run in one of the later stages, and then I'm going to take the results of the artifacts that are built there and stash them. Use the stash command, the stash step in pipeline to store those artifacts for reuse in later stages of the pipeline. Stash in this case, by the way, is not like a deploy. Is not installing the artifact in any sort of local cache. It's actually it's just a per pipeline cache, and so it's completely independent of any. You can store any kind of files you want, not specifically Maven-based files or whatever. All right. So before I move on to test, let me go back over here, and we can add that particular. We can go into the editor, and let's see. I'm going to start by adding a Docker agent. The image is going to be Maven 3-Alpine. And the args that I need are a little bit involved, so I've got them stored over here, like so. There they are. And as you can see, this is a little bit different than what's shown in the slides. That's intentional on my part. The setup's a little bit not exactly the same as what's in the presentation. So just that's the way it goes right now. Let's see. So that's the image, and then I'm going to change this shell step as well to be. There we go. So there's this, however, is much the same. No surprises there. And then having done that, I'll add another step to this that will stash some files to be used later. I'll call it war, and it'll include the target, all the files in the target directory. Let me see, did I want that? Yes. So that's my build stage. So now I can go ahead and save this. Let's see. Go. Again, it's going to generate the pipeline. Actually, let me show you that for a second while that's running. So I added the build commands. You can make this a little larger. There we go. And what the editor is actually generating is the Jenkins file here, and here's the actual declarative pipeline, just like you would expect. I could go in and actually edit this manually, and I may do that in a minute here to do the next set of stages if I feel like it. All right. Let's see, is that running? Oh, it failed. Why did it fail? Docker version is older than. Well, that's new. The joys of live demoing. I just did this a minute ago. I literally just did this morning. Working directory will be non-existent directory. Change the result now. Oh dear. Well, this could be fun. All right. Well, I will move on for now. More important to actually show the thing than actually to show it working. All right, so test. Starting with our backend tests. Again, this will look pretty familiar. It's similar to the build stage because we're still using Maven, but instead of skipping those tests, we'll actually run them now. We'll also use another agent, just like we did on the previous one. It'll look, again, this is, we'll use it uses the same type of agent, may not be the same one, the actual same container, though. And the steps that we'll do to run those backend unit tests will be to unstash our artifacts and then run the Maven test step and then publish the results using Surefire, the JUnit step in Pipeline. And let's see. So we're actually going to do these two stages in parallel. So we have the unit tests and the performance tests that run in parallel. They're going to use two different agents. It'll be the same agent declaration, but two different agents. And then we'll also, for the performance test, we'll also unstash the artifacts that we built and then run the Maven Gatling plugin. Now, the one disadvantage here is that the Maven Gatling plugin doesn't generate JUnit output, and so we can't publish it directly, but that's really something to be worked on later. And of course, we'll be running them in parallel. We could see that in the visual editor, but you can also see it in the declarative code. We'll get back to the front end, and actually, I'll just talk about the front end test now. I'm running a little bit slow. So the front end test, on the other hand, will be running a different Docker image entirely on Node Alpine, and they'll run yarn install, a global, and some other node steps using gulp. Again, that one also doesn't generate output in a JUnit form, so we can't do anything with that right now. All right, let's go back and do that. And maybe I can figure out what happened to the rest of that. So, all right, so here's the editor. And I'm going to, rather than walk through each of these and edit them manually, which I could do, I'm going to just pop out into looking at the raw code. And I've already got that sort of set out. Yeah, there it is. All right. There we go. All right. And for the sake of speed, I've actually commented out the shell steps themselves. So let me I'm going to drop in this front end stage here. I'm not going to worry about, there we go. So agent and steps. I'm not going to worry about getting the indentation on that right. And then, as you can see, here's the parallel, these two parallel stages inside of backend. I will go and grab those as well. And a little bit more verbose. There we go. Backend, there we go. I'll just replace this code. Sometimes it's nice to have the visual editor to work with. Sometimes it's nice to be able to just skip past it and create put in the code that you want. All right. So let me go ahead and save this. Add tests. There we go. All right, so that's running. I can see that it's actually started. It'll start running, tells me that it's run those. Let me take a second and see if I can understand what this thing is doing wrong. No such file or directory. Can't rename. Log. Working directory. Weird. All right. So even when it takes you to the right thing, you can't always analyze it live on stage. Dang. Actually, let me try one thing here. I have this running on my local VM, so. If I can type the password, I'll be great. There we go. All right, so. Okay. One of these days. Okay. So let's go see if that. Let's see if that nailed it down. I'm just going to go ahead and rerun this. Anyways, all right. So that's our front end tests. And so let's talk about code analysis for a minute. We have the analyze stage in our code. At this point, we would do any sort of static analysis that you like. Code coverage checks, quality scanning with find bugs, PMD. I'm actually not going to do this here. It takes quite a bit longer to do the configuration, but there's a good blog post on it if you're interested in taking a look. And finally, deploy. Assuming that the application is built correctly and your Docker hasn't blown up on you for no reason whatsoever, all the tests have passed. Great, now we're ready to deploy. Again, don't reinvent your system for this. Pipeline is glue, so deployment may have many different meanings, and it's really organization specific. It could be deploying to AWS or Azure. It could be a physical data center. It could be an app store, or even just an internal artifact server. So here we have the stage, and I'm just going to use sort of a little bit of a hand-waving thing here to do a deploy.sh. You can imagine this being deploying to a production host. There's lots of different ways this could go. All right, so let's see if this worked. It did not. Well, this is what happens when you do things live. Literally, I had it working right before this. Anyways. All right, so cool things about Blue Ocean, at least. It'll show you what changes you've made. You can actually see the commits and their descriptions. If this were working, you would be able to actually see the tests. It would give you a green, or actually show you the actual test failures. And it would also include the artifacts that were included in the build. So, since I can't get to that right now, I think it's best if I just ask people if there are any questions so far. Yes?
When you unstash,
yeah.
where does the artifact actually go? Because you sort of just run a test, but it's not apparent. How does the test know where to pick up that artifact?
Right. So the question was when I unstash, when I do the unstash command. Let me actually go over to that. So let's look at the pipeline for this at least, as long as we have it. That's just going to run again. I don't want that. So if I edit this, so here's my steps. Yeah. So this is restore previously stashed files, which is also, you can see here, the unstashed WAR. And the question was, where do those files go? They go exactly the same place that they were stashed from. So in this case, if you're unless you tell it somewhere else, I think you can. In fact, there's a parameter to say unstash to a different location, but otherwise it just stashes to this, unstashes in the same path. So I stashed all the files inside of target. It's going to unstash all the files into target. And then, so the test, the Maven test command that runs there actually just runs, expects to find the WAR in the target, and it does. And so then it goes and runs that WAR. Other questions? Yes?
So yesterday there was a similar demo with Jenkins, but used Spinnaker. So how is your demo here different than that?
How is it different? Well, this is running on Jenkins. That's one thing, obviously.
Like she was doing Jenkins to put a Docker image, and then Jenkins was continuously monitoring a folder, and then when there's a change, it would commit to Git, and then it would. I think the Spinnaker thing just deployed it automatically. So in this, is it doing any of the deployment? This is just a.
So that's actually so the question is, how is this different from the Spinnaker demo from yesterday? That used Jenkins and then ran Spinnaker on the output. Is that right?
Yeah, they use Spinnaker, I believe, to deploy.
Okay.
Monitor the folder, and when there was a change, it pushed it out.
So this would work seamlessly. It basically replaced whatever you saw yesterday that Jenkins was doing with this. And if at that point, if you wanted to, you could actually just omit the deploy stage, or have that deploy stage copied to the folder that you want Spinnaker to pick up from, for example. Other questions? Yeah, yes.
Is there a way to define pipelines as infrastructure as code? So have those jobs defined in Jenkins as code, and then just have it pick up on the Jenkins file repository?
Oh, yeah, that's what this is doing. Sorry, is that not? Sorry. So the question was: is there a way to define this as code? That's what this is doing, in fact.
The Jenkins file is the build stages and that sort of stuff.
Right.
To actually create the pipeline jobs themselves.
Ah, okay. So the question is, can you also create the pipeline jobs themselves? And by that you mean like this top level. Let me exit this. So this top level job here, the pipelines. There we go. This. What this looks like, by the way, in classic UI is here, and it creates a sub. What looks like a folder with jobs in it, pipeline jobs in it. It'll create a new one of these for each branch or tag by default. Scripting that as code, that is not built into pipeline, but there's a couple different things. One, there's a GitHub organization job that you could actually define and say point it at an entire organization rather than just one repository, so you could control things that way. There is also a project for configuration as code that would let you create a YAML file that does configuration of saying what plugins you want. This is still in alpha pretty much, but it's coming on soon. And then you could actually create jobs in that YAML file as the top level thing to say, okay, here's my Jenkins, here's my top level multi-branch pipelines, and then those would go and pick up Jenkins files. Or you could use one of those, one of the Job DSL or Jenkins Job Builder, one of those, to go and script that one top level sort of, okay, here's my top level thing, and then go from there.
That's what we're doing.
Okay. Yeah, it's okay. I'll repeat the question. It's cool.
So we are not using Jenkins Pipeline, but we are using traditional Jenkins, and there are multi-jobs which people configure manually. Basically, same interface as currently on the screen with sub-tasks,
Right.
full, including parallel execution, etc. But what's what's the principal difference between the pipeline versus classical Jenkins with multi-jobs? Because those can also be triggered by commit and can also run parallel and can also run the same tasks. So what's the value added of specifically pipeline?
Right. So the pipeline has a bunch of newer technology in it. It's actually a runtime, not a. It's a different runtime than the classic Jenkins jobs. It allows you to actually do things like resume your job after if you restart your Jenkins master and you have jobs that are running and they're on agents, those jobs will actually continue across master restarts. For one example, there's also the fact that you're actually running that. It's actually running that code. It's not just here's my XML file and some stuff. It's actually running that particular Groovy code. Trade-offs is it's just a different way of going about it.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, and that's time. So, thank you all.